evening. Yes, good. Have you ever wondered how different your life would be if you didn't meet your significant other at a party, or if you didn't habitually treat yourself to that extra piece of cake or emotional support chocolate that resulted in you not being able to squeeze into a pair of pants? Have you ever had that moment? Like, invisible yet significant moments in your story. Similarly, history is filled with moments or events which are often unnoticed, unmentioned, or just a little bit out of the frame in the glimpses we have of the past. It is my honor to welcome you all to the launch of An Invisible History of Sri Lanka by Ranjan Chintaka Mendis. Thank you. Today's launch is an invitation to think about the moments that might have gone unnoticed, but which have, in retrospect, proved to be the threads that weave the fabric of our shared past. Thank you all for being here today to celebrate Chintaka's achievement. Many thanks to His Excellency Rémi Lambert, Ambassador-Designate for Sri Lanka and the Maldives, for taking the time to be here with us today. Your Excellency, if you would please address the crowd. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me as Ambassador designated to Sri Lanka to open this ceremony and this presentation by Ranjan Chintaka Mendis on his book, An Invisible Story. I'm very pleased that it takes place tonight at Alliance Française de Colombo with very distinguished attendance of legal experts, judges, and lawyers from Colombo and Sri Lanka. I will be very pleased to listen to the honorable speaker and author of this book, and it's a privilege for me to meet all of you. Thank you very much.
His Excellency, the Ambassador of France in Sri Lanka and the Maldives, Monsieur Rémi Lambert, Deputy Ambassador, Madame Marie-Noël Juris, Cultural Councillor, Olivia Belmer, Cecile Orelberg, Directress of Alliance, there she is, distinguished guests, and my dear friends. Let me very warmly welcome you all to this book launch, The Invisible History of Early Ceylon, by my dear friend, Chintaka Mendis. When Chintaka mentioned me about this book launch, I invited him to have this lovely event held here at Alliance Française for several reasons. Inter alia, our friendship as learned friends at the bar. Chintaka is an alumnus of Alliance Française de Colombo, where we all share so many fond, cherished memories. His sister Sunimal was also a student at Alliance Française de Colombo, who was, in fact, my contemporary. On the other hand, Chintaka's passion for history and archaeology has no bounds. And I'm certain that it is a dream come true to Chintaka to have Professor Osmund Bopearachchi as the guest speaker tonight. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor for Alliance Française to have Professor Osmund at this crucial juncture where Alliance Française de Colombo celebrates its 70th anniversary this year. That said, without much further ado, let me share a short introduction of Professor Osmund Bopearachchi, whose profile otherwise runs into pages and pages. He is a corresponding member of the French Academy of Inscription and Belles-Lettres and an emeritus director of research of the French National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS-ENS, Paris. I think he is the only Asian, if I may, to achieve this excellence. He is an art historian, an archaeologist, a former visiting professor, and a member of the doctoral school of Paris-Sorbonne University in Paris. Professor Bopearachchi holds a BA, Bachelor of Arts from the University of California, and thereafter a BA Honours, MA, MPhil, and a PhD from Paris-Sorbonne University, and a higher doctorate, habilitation, from the Paris 4 Sorbonne University. This is what I like. Among his numerous publications, he has written 16 books, 151 academic articles, 6 exhibition catalogs, and edited 6 volumes. He has read 107 papers in international colloquia. These are not just colloquia, I think these are definitely of international acumen. Delivered 327 talks in 166 universities, museums and associations all over the world. And he has carried out archaeological missions in 30 different countries, including Afghanistan, during the height of the war, excuse me to say this, where he was held hostage by the extremist militia. The French Academy of Inscriptions and Belles-Lettres has honored 5 of his books. In 2006, the French government honored his career achievements with the L'Ordre des Palmes Académiques, Order of Academic Palm. With that, Professor Bopearachchi, may I sincerely invite you to address the gathering. Thank you.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, chers collègues français, distinguished guests and dear friends. It gives me great pleasure to say a few words about the book written by my good friend Rajan Chintaka Mendis, entitled An Invisible History of Early Sri Lanka. I warmly congratulate you, dear Chintaka, who is a renowned lawyer who has stepped out of his field to write this stimulating and challenging book on the invisible history of Sri Lanka. As you will agree, it is impossible to present a summary of all the positive and negative aspects of a 545-page book. In the 20 minutes allocated to me, I would like to touch upon a few points that caught my attention. Before commenting on the positive side of the book, I am going to raise a few points of principle on what I cannot entirely agree with our author's analysis. I hope you don't mind. I felt I had a few points to make about the part 6 of the Silk Road, that is chapter 36 to 42. In this section, although Chintaka Mendis cites the recent publications of Peter Frankopan, I was amazed, you know him as well, and then Tansen Sen and MacGregor, the French researchers who have made irrefutable contributions to Silk Road studies are not being referred, unfortunately, since I'm in Alliance. Next, please. It is important to refer to François Thierry, who in his book, Le Royaume de Lyon, Selon connu des Chinois, des origines à la fin du sang, has faithfully translated into French all the ancient Chinese texts relating to Sri Lanka. Apart from a few exceptions, Chinese ships never came to Sri Lanka before the 7th century CE. Next. On the contrary, as François Thierry has pointed out, from the, next please. From the last years of the Jin dynasty to the end of the Tang dynasty, Chinese sources recorded 11 delegations of Sinhalese bhikkhuni, the nuns, sent to China. This means that these delegations embarked in India on Indian or Sri Lankan ships. Next. The journey of the esoteric Buddhist monk Vajrabodhi in the 7th century CE, first to Sri Lanka and then to China, was made possible by the development of trade networks to the east. The sea route taken by the Persian ships with Vajrabodhi on board was the same one used by the Sinhalese Buddhist nuns, bhikkhunis, heading towards the capital of the Tang dynasty. Next. Among the many other French researchers, I can at least mention the publications by Jean-François Salle, Marie-Françoise Boussac, Jean-Pierre Drèche, and Ariane de Saxe. As for the periples of the Erythraean Sea, instead of W.H. Schauff's translation, it would have been preferable to refer to the advanced research of Didier Marcotte, Christian Robin, and Desonge, or even Lionel Cusson, whose annotated English translation is excellent. Furthermore, except for the accidental arrival to Sri Lanka of the Roman freedman named Annius Procamus, Romans had very little direct maritime contacts with Sri Lanka before the 2nd century CE. And as I have argued elsewhere, if they did, it was through intermediaries in southern India. Next. Compared with the thousands of Roman denarii from the Julio-Claudian period found in India, only a handful of coins of this type have been discovered in Sri Lanka. Quoting H.W. Codrington, our author, exaggerated when he spoke a large number of coins. Next, please. On the contrary, over 200,000 coins found in Sri Lanka that I mentioned in my essays belong to the late Republican period. Next, please. Starting from Constantine I, whose reign is dated from 272 CE. As I have argued, this era is marked by the direct Roman maritime trade with Sri Lanka. Cosmas Indicopolystus, a merchant, traveler, and later a hermit or a monk from Alexandria in Egypt, wrote in the 6th century, Sri Lanka was the center of maritime trade in the Indian Ocean at that time. I do not deny that a century after the Sri Lankan delegation visited Rome, Romans began to have direct contact with Sri Lanka. Next. It is striking to note that recent research carried out by my Italian colleagues, archaeologists, on the mummy of Grotta Rossa, that of an 8-year-old girl found 11 kilometers from Via Cassia in north of Rome, testifies to the trade between Rome and Sri Lanka. The child's body placed in a sarcophagus decorated with the hunting scene, inspired by an episode of the Book 4 of the Aeneid, is currently preserved in the National Museum at Palazzo Massimo in Rome. Next. Near the mummy were several other artifacts, an ivory doll with articulated arms and legs, gold earrings, a gold ring adorned with a winged victory, small red amber vase, and small amulets. The mummy wore a fine tunic of Chinese silk and a gold necklace adorned with 13 blue sapphires. Italian archaeologists and gemologists concluded that the blue sapphires came from Sri Lanka. The decoration of the sarcophagus and the analysis of the offerings led the archaeologists to date the tomb to the second half of the 2nd century CE, when there was a direct Roman contact with Sri Lanka. Next. It is entirely possible that the depictions of cupids and griffins that you mentioned, Chintaka, attested in the Eastern Mahalkada, dated to the 2nd century CE from the Abhegiri Stupa, next, found their way into a Buddhist monument in Sri Lanka via Rome trader who imported a sketch of these particular Roman art forms, next, or he may have simply have drawn them or described them to the local artists who carved this sculpture. Next. Whatever the mode of transmission, here we have a Sri Lankan version of a Roman art form. Next. The discovery of Roman antecedents from Andhra Buddhist art has been thoroughly discussed by art historians. Roman acquaintance with the island has its own history. Next, please. Thus, the existence of carvings of Roman inspiration is not surprising. On this, you can see a Roman and Ethiopian trader in a Jataka story of the Buddha. Leaving aside these minor remarks, my dear Chintaka, let me come to the core of your book, which I read with great interest. How can a historian be impartial when writing about King Dutugamenu? The Mahavamsa, the major source on the reign of Dutugamenu, devotes 6 chapters out of 37 to Dutugamanu. How can I fail to admire Chintakamendi's starting point when he dares to say in his preface, with reference to the two chronicles, the Deepavamsa and the Mahavamsa, considered by many of his predecessors to be the biblical truths. I quote you. The chronicle narrate a history from the viewpoint of the Buddhist clergy according to the names, order of succession, and length of reigns of kings, as well as important political and religious events. Apart from these matters, the Deepavamsa, the Mahavamsa, and other later works are usually confined to religious activities and irrigation projects carried out by rulers. A reader is left with the impression that waging war, building monasteries and irrigation works, making donations to religious establishments, and engaging in agriculture was what ancient Sri Lanka was about. Quotation ends. Let us focus on the story told by in the Mahavamsa of Dutugamanu, the son of Kavantissa of Rovana, who is said to have organized a great campaign to liberate Buddhism from Elara, the Dravidian prince who ruled, who was called Chola, who is not Chola but a Tamil prince, who ruled in Anuradhapura in the 2nd century BC for 45 years. Let us also take a look at how Chintakamendi sees this national hero whose war cry was not for kingdom, but for Buddhism. Next. How many movies have been made to glorify Dutugamanu's legacy? Next. Politicians of the past loved to play the role of Dutugamanu to promote themselves. This is a good example. In Chintakamendi's book, 16 of the 52 chapters or 126 pages, including endnotes of the 445 pages, are devoted to the story of Gamanu or Dutugamanu Abaya, one of the most powerful symbols of Sinhala historical power, also reputed to have been the first to unify the whole island of Sri Lanka. It is worth re-examining the over-exaggerated hero figure of Dutugamanu, who waged war against King Elara, that Chintakamendi boldly qualifies Elara the Just. Further to justify his position, our author quotes the Deepavamsa, which records Elara avoided the 4 evil paths of lust, hatred, fear, and ignorance, and that this uncomparable monarch reigned righteously. The questions arise in our mind why Sri Lankan historians, storytellers, movie directors, and above all politicians made Elara the enemy of the people. Next. Reverend Walpola Rahula, whom I admire, whom I knew, in his book, History of Buddhism from the 3rd century BCE to the 10th century AD, published in 1956, correctly pointed out, I quote, "The entire Sinhalese race was united under the banner of the Yangamani. This was the beginning of nationalism among the Sinhalese. It was a new race with healthy young blood organized under the new order of Buddhism, a kind of religio nationalism which almost amounted to fanaticism, roused the whole Sinhalese people. A non-Buddhist was not regarded as a human being. Thus, orthodox religious opinion encouraged Buddhist nationalism." Quotation ends. Next. Reverend Walpola Rahula refers to the episode where, after the defeat of Elara, the victorious Dutugamanu repented for the destruction of several thousands of human lives. I quote, "Sitting then on the terrace of the royal palace, adorned, lighted with fragrant lamps and filled with many perfumes, he, King Dutugamanu, looking back upon his glorious victory, great though it was, knew no joy, remembering that thereby was wrought the destruction of millions of human beings. When the Arhat, Piyagudipa, knew his thought, they sent 8 Arahants to confront the king. Next, how shall there be any comfort for me, says Dutgamanu, O venerable sirs, since by me was caused the slaughter of great host numbering millions. From this deed arises no hindrance in thy way to heaven. Only 1.5 human beings have been slain here by thee, O Lord of men. The one had come unto 3 refugees. The other had taken himself 5 precepts. Unbelievers, Mityaditti, and men of evil life, Dushila, were the rest, not more to be esteemed than beasts. This is a word used in Pali. But as for thee, thou wilt bring glory to the doctrine of the Buddha in manifold ways. Therefore, cast away care from the heart, O the ruler of men. Quotation ends. Next, the death of Elara, the saint, as Chintakamendis calls him, justly. Quote, Dutgamanu was not well in Anuradhapura, says the author, because, I quote him again, the inhabitants of metropolitan Anuradhapura were outraged at the killing of their just and benevolent monarch, Elara. Quotation ends. To win the popularity of the outraged inhabitants of Anuradhapura, Dutgamanu, who has killed a saint, has only one choice, and Chintakamendis makes it very clear. Next, I quote him. The Buddhist superstructure envisaged by Dutgamanu was nothing less than an elevation of Buddhism to the official religion of the state. Quotation ends. It goes without saying that I fully share our author's opinion, which no other historian before him has had the intelligence and the courage to formulate in such clear terms. As Reverend Walpola Rahula correctly pointed out explicitly, the orthodox religious opinion encouraged by Buddhist nationalism is exactly what Buddhaputra Stavihira, next please, commonly known as Mairopada Thera, says in this Pujavaliya. I quote, this island of Lanka belongs to the Buddha himself. It is like a treasure filled with 3 gems. Therefore, the residence of wrong believers in this island will never be permanent, just as the residence of the Yakkas, or the demons of old, was not permanent. Even if a non-Buddhist ruled Lanka by force, a while it is a particular power of the Buddha, that his line will not be established. Therefore, as Lanka is suitable only for Buddhist kings, it is certain that their lines too will be established. Quotation ends. This Sinhalese classic written in the 13th century goes well beyond the chronological framework established by our author. However, its contents shows the long-term consequences of the Buddhist superstructure envisaged by Dutgamanu, who elevated Buddhism to the rank of official state religion. I think my time is up. Before, let me say a few words about Chintakamendis' methodology. I was pleasantly surprised by his exhaustive bibliography of 396 titles. Apart from a few important French publications, our author has read everything necessary to write a history book. I am also impressed by his 1,577 endnotes. They are exhaustive and precise. At a time when so-called Sri Lankan historians are writing distorted accounts of the Sri Lankan history To please successive political powers, Chintaka Mendis remains impartial and courageous in his analysis. Next. I hope to have convinced you to assume that Chintaka Mendis' approach to history is not that of W. Tan, who was a lawyer, like you, who defended the colonial policy of the British Empire and saw himself as a civilizer of the uncivilized. Chintaka Mendis' historical approach is not that of a religious nationalist, but that of an impartial and scientific analyst. Our country desperately needs historians of your caliber. I can only congratulate you, dear Chintaka, and encourage you to continue writing. I'll be always with you. Thank you very much.